Oliver had a life that many would dream of. A respected civil engineer, he had built more than bridges and buildings. He had built a life alongside Elizabeth, his wife, and their young daughter, Sophia. Elizabeth was the heart of their home, an art teacher, known for her vibrant passion and love for the small things in life. While Oliver was practical and methodical, Elizabeth was the opposite, an explosion of colors and feelings, always reminding her husband how brief and precious life is. Life is like a painting, Oliver. If we don't learn to appreciate the colors, it loses its meaning, she often said with a smile that could light up any room. On Friday nights, the family had a tradition. Their living room turned into a small cinema where they watched old movies, snuggled on the couch, eating popcorn. Oliver would look at them, his wife and his daughter, and feel his heart warm. He never imagined that something could break that perfect balance. But life is full of unexpected moments, and one of them was about to change everything. It all started with a tiredness that wouldn't go away. Elizabeth, always so active, began feeling weak. Small daily activities, like teaching or tending to the garden, began to take much more effort than before. Oliver noticed, but he preferred to believe it was just exhaustion. She worked too hard, he thought. Until one day, Elizabeth fainted. That afternoon, Oliver took her to the hospital. The tests came back, bringing the news that would shatter his world. Elizabeth had been diagnosed with a rare and aggressive illness. Her time was running out. Oliver's world crumbled right there. The weeks that followed were a blur of hospital visits, painful treatments, and a growing silence at home. Each day, Elizabeth grew weaker. Sophia, too young to fully understand, watched her parents with fear in her eyes. She didn't know what was happening, but she could feel her mother slipping away, and that terrified her. One cold autumn morning, Elizabeth called Oliver for a talk. Her eyes were tired, but there was strength in her voice that he couldn't ignore. She knew her time was running out, and there was something she needed to say. "Promise me, Oliver," she said, her voice weak but firm. "Promise me that you'll keep going, that you'll take care of Sophia, that you won't let the pain consume you." Oliver, with tears in his eyes, held her hands. He wanted to scream, wanted to say that he couldn't do it. How could he go on without her? A world without Elizabeth seemed unbearable, but he knew he had no choice. "I promise," he whispered. Elizabeth smiled softly, closing her eyes with the confidence that her family would be in good hands. And at that moment, Oliver felt the crushing weight of that promise. He had promised, but he didn't know how he would keep it. That afternoon, Elizabeth passed away. Oliver's heart shattered, and with her, a part of him died too. Now, he was alone. Alone with his grief. Alone with his promise. And as he held Sophia, who cried silently beside him, he wondered how he would ever move forward. The days after Elizabeth's death were wrapped in silence. The house, once full of laughter and life, now felt heavy and suffocating. Oliver couldn't bear to look at Elizabeth's things without feeling his chest tighten. Her scent still lingered in the air. The paintings she had started remained unfinished in the studio, and the photos hanging on the walls seemed to watch him, reminding him of a life that now felt far too distant. Oliver went back to work, but nothing made sense anymore. The bridges he designed seemed empty, much like his life. The focus he once had, his ability to organize thoughts and solve engineering problems, was now replaced by a growing void inside him. He spent more time at the office, trying to escape the emptiness of home, leaving Sophia increasingly alone. Sophia, for her part, was lost. At 15 years old, she struggled to understand what had happened. Her mother, the center of her world, was gone, and now her father seemed to be slipping away too. Oliver, consumed by his own grief, didn't see how much his daughter was suffering. Sophia spent more and more time in her room, isolated. The few conversations between them were short and almost always tense. One evening, Sophia approached Oliver, trying to break the silence. "Dad, can you help me with a school project?" she asked, holding a sheet of paper. Oliver, distracted, looked at her with tired eyes. He was sitting at the dining table, his gaze fixed on some work papers, but clearly his mind was elsewhere. "Not now, Sophia, I'm busy," he replied, not even looking up. Sophia stood there for a moment, waiting for him to change his mind. But when she realized he wouldn't even apologize, she turned and walked away in silence. Tears filled her eyes as she climbed the stairs. That small interaction was a reflection of everything their relationship had become: distant, cold, and disconnected. As time passed, the distance between them only grew. Oliver began to drink. At first, it was just a glass of whiskey at night, something to ease the pain. But slowly, the glasses multiplied, and the lonely nights in front of the bottle became more frequent. He came home late from work, often spending hours at the bar before heading back, where Sophia was either asleep or locked in her room. Sophia, increasingly isolated, started seeking comfort outside the house. She made new friends, many of whom were questionable influences. School became less of a priority, and soon she started skipping classes. Among her new companions was Bruno, a boy a few years older than her, rebellious and troubled. Bruno was everything Sophia didn't find at home: attention, adventure, and a sense of freedom, even if dangerous. He took her to parties, places where she felt grown up, far from the worries and pain that consumed her at home. While Sophia spiraled into rebellion, Oliver became more and more blind to what was happening right in front of him. The promise he made to Elizabeth, to take care of Sophia and be strong, was crumbling, but he couldn't see it. Grief had blinded him. Days passed, and he simply survived. Until, one night, everything fell apart. Oliver came home late, his mind dulled by alcohol. As he entered the living room, he noticed that Sophia wasn't home. It was almost 11 p.m. She was always home by then, even when she spent long hours locked in her room. An immediate fear gripped him, but he tried to rationalize. Maybe she just went to a friend's house, he thought. He waited, but Sophia didn't come back. At 2 a.m., Oliver was sitting on the couch, his hands trembling with nerves, when he heard the front door creak open. Sophia walked in, a defiant expression on her face, smelling of alcohol and cigarettes. Seeing her like that, anger surged through Oliver. "Where have you been?" he shouted, standing up abruptly. Sophia, already impatient, rolled her eyes. "It's none of your business. You don't even care about me anymore. So why should I care where I was?" Those words cut Oliver like a knife. He tried to control his anger, but he was beyond his limit. "I am your father. You have to respect me," he yelled back. Sophia, now in tears, faced him. "Respect you? How can I respect someone who barely looks at me? You drowned in your pain. But what about me, Dad? I lost Mom too, and now I've lost you as well. You promised to take care of me, but you abandoned me." Oliver stood there stunned. Sophia's words echoed in his mind like thunder. She was right. He had failed. He had broken his promise. Speechless, Oliver watched her storm up the stairs and slam her bedroom door. At that moment, he realized just how lost he was. He had lost not only Elizabeth, but also Sophia. The promise he made to his wife now seemed distant, almost impossible to keep. Oliver sank into the couch, tears streaming down his face, feeling the crushing weight of his failure. After the intense argument with Sophia, Oliver sat motionless on the couch, her words echoing in his mind. He had promised to take care of her, but he had failed in every possible way. He felt an overwhelming emptiness and for the first time saw clearly how deeply he had lost himself in his grief. He hadn't just lost Elizabeth. He was on the verge of losing Sophia for good. That same night, something shifted inside Oliver. He couldn't go on like this. The promise he made to Elizabeth couldn't just be a vague memory. If there was still a chance to regain his daughter's trust, he had to seize it, no matter how distant it seemed. The first thing he did was pour the bottle of whiskey sitting on the table down the sink. It wouldn't be easy, he knew that. But the first step was clear. He needed to be sober to be present in Sophia's life. In the days that followed, Oliver started attending support meetings, a group for people dealing with grief and alcoholism. He didn't like talking about his feelings, but as he listened to the stories of others, he realized he wasn't alone in his pain. Sharing his loss with strangers was painful at first, but with each session, he felt like he was digging up parts of the weight that had held him down. More importantly, he began to see that to care for Sophia, he first needed to take care of himself. However, the situation with Sophia wasn't improving as quickly as Oliver had hoped. She remained distant, and her absences from home were becoming more frequent. He tried to reach out, but his attempts were met with frustration. Sophia had built a wall around herself, and Oliver couldn't break through it anymore. One afternoon, after school, Oliver decided to speak with the principal. He was worried about Sophia's frequent absences and wanted to understand what was happening. When he entered the office, the principal looked at him with a serious expression. "Mr. Oliver, I'm sorry to say this, but Sophia has been missing a lot of classes in recent weeks. Her grades are slipping, and I've heard that she's been associating with some troubled kids." Oliver's heart sank. He knew she was pulling away, but he had no idea how far things had gone. The principal paused before continuing. "I think it would be a good idea for you to meet her boyfriend. His name is Bruno, and I'm worried about the influence he might be having on Sophia." Oliver was taken aback. He knew Sophia had been hanging out with the wrong crowd, but a boyfriend? This was the first time he'd heard about it. He left the school with a heavy heart, determined to learn more about Bruno. Sophia was already out of control, and the last thing he wanted was for her to get hurt even more. That night, Oliver finally decided to confront his daughter. When she came through the door, her clothes wrinkled and a rebellious look on her face, he tried to stay calm. "Sophia, we need to talk," Oliver said firmly. Sophia rolled her eyes, already expecting another argument. "About what?" she replied, impatient. "About this Bruno. I know he's your boyfriend. I want to know more about him, and you need to understand that I'm worried about the choices you're making." Sophia turned abruptly, her face darkening. "You don't know anything about me, Dad. Bruno is the only person who actually cares about me. He understands me, unlike you." Oliver, trying to keep his composure, pressed on. "I just want what's best for you. He doesn't seem like a good influence." Sophia, now with tears in her eyes, exploded. "Don't tell me what to do. You weren't here when I needed you. Now it's too late to try and take care of me." She stormed out the door, and this time Oliver didn't follow. He felt like every attempt to get closer only pushed her further away. But Bruno's name troubled him, and he knew something was wrong. He needed to find out who this boy really was. In the following days, Oliver began to investigate on his own. He discovered that Bruno was the son of Marco Almeida, a former employee at the construction company where Oliver had worked years ago. He remembered Marco well. He had been fired after a series of serious mistakes on a project that had nearly ruined Oliver's career. What Oliver didn't know, until now, was that the firing had devastated Bruno's family. Marco never recovered professionally and eventually lost his home, plunging the family into poverty and deep resentment. Bruno, growing up in the bitterness and resentment of his father, had apparently been seeking revenge, and now it seemed that Sophia was being used as part of that plan. Oliver was shocked to discover this. He felt the weight of guilt. His decisions in the past had, in some way, put his own daughter in danger. Bruno wasn't close to Sophia because he cared about her. He was seeking to hurt Oliver. Determined that he had to act before it was too late, Oliver went to confront Bruno personally. He found him in a parking lot, leaving an underground party with Sophia. When Bruno saw Oliver approaching, he immediately went on the defensive. "What do you want?" Bruno asked with a mocking smile. Oliver, anger boiling inside but trying to stay composed, looked directly at him. "I know who you are, and I know why you're close to my daughter." Bruno kept his smile, but his eyes betrayed discomfort. Sophia, confused, looked at her father, then at Bruno, not understanding what was happening. "What is he talking about, Bruno?" she asked, her voice full of uncertainty. Oliver took a deep breath and then told the truth. "Bruno is with you because he wants revenge. I fired his father years ago, and their lives fell apart. Now he's trying to hurt me through you." Sophia froze for a moment. She looked at Bruno, searching for answers, but he looked away. Tears welled up in her eyes as the truth slowly dawned on her. "Bruno, is that true?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Bruno's silence was the confirmation she feared. The silence that followed the revelation seemed to last an eternity. Sophia stared at Bruno, the boy she thought loved her, the one who made her feel something amid the chaos of her life, and now saw everything fall apart. The betrayal was clear in his eyes, and unable to deny the truth, he simply lowered his head. Bruno tried to justify himself, his voice full of hesitation. "Sophia, I never meant to hurt you. At first it was about my dad, but over time I really started to care about you." Sophia, with tears in her eyes, took a step back as if trying to distance herself from all the pain that moment represented. She looked at her father, seeking refuge she hadn't found in a long time. "I can't believe this," she murmured as the tears streamed down her face. Oliver, despite his anger toward Bruno, knew this wasn't the time to turn against the boy. He was too worried about Sophia, about the devastation that this revelation would cause her. He approached his daughter slowly, hesitantly, but determined. "Sophia," he said softly, his voice filled with emotion, "I'm so sorry. I know I've failed you in so many ways. I wasn't there when you needed me the most. And now this." Sophia looked at her father with a mixture of pain and confusion. She wanted to believe him, to trust him again, but everything seemed to be collapsing at once. Oliver continued, his voice shaking. "I made a promise to your mother that I would always be here for you. And I broke that promise, Sophia. But I want to fix this. It won't be easy, but I'm here now, and I will never leave you alone again." Sophia remained silent, struggling to process everything. She felt betrayed by Bruno, disappointed by her father, but also deeply tired of carrying the pain for so long. She looked again at Bruno, who at that moment had become a bitter memory of her wrong decisions, a shadow of everything she had tried to escape. "Leave, Bruno," she said, her voice soft but firm. Bruno looked at her one last time before turning and leaving, without saying another word. Sophia watched him walk away, feeling that a painful chapter of her life was closing. When she turned back to look at Oliver, there was still hurt in her eyes, but something in her heart had shifted. The anger was no longer as intense, and behind the tears, she saw her father's vulnerability, something he had never shown before. After a long silence, Sophia finally said, "I don't know if I can forgive you, Dad. Not now." Oliver nodded, understanding that the road ahead would be long. "I know," he replied, "but I'm going to fight for you, Sophia, and I'm going to prove that I'm worthy of your trust again. I can't change the past, but I can make everything different from now on." In the days that followed, Oliver began to take control of his life again. He remained committed to the support meetings, stopped drinking, and started actively participating in Sophia's life. He didn't just control her, like in the past, but tried to understand her needs, to get involved in what she liked. However, it didn't happen overnight. Sophia still kept her distance, afraid that the change was temporary. But the biggest change came when Oliver made a decision that surprised his daughter. He went to Marco's house, Bruno's father, the man he had fired so many years ago. Oliver knew this step was necessary not only to repair his relationship with Sophia, but also to redeem himself for something he knew he had caused. Marco greeted him with a look of contempt, full of bitterness built up over the years. "You have the nerve to show up here after everything you did?" Marco spat as soon as he saw Oliver at the door. Oliver, his voice calm, replied, "I came here to apologize." Marco stared at him with skepticism, but let Oliver in. They sat in a simple living room where time seemed to have stopped. Oliver took a deep breath before continuing. I was wrong to you. I made decisions without considering the impact they would have on your life. I was so focused on my job, so obsessed with keeping my own career intact, that I didn't realize what my decision meant for your family. I understand now that it destroyed you in many ways, and I'm sorry for that. Marco, still bitter, shook his head. Apologies don't bring back what I lost. I know, Oliver said, but it's the first step, and I'm here because I want to make peace. I can't change the past, but I can try to repair the present. Marco was silent for a while, reflecting on Oliver's words. He didn't know if he was ready to forgive, but something in Oliver's tone made him believe that, for the first time in years, someone was genuinely sorry. When Oliver returned home, Sophia was waiting for him. She knew where he had gone, and although she was still hurt, something had changed within her. She saw that her father was willing to go beyond words, to make real sacrifices to fix his mistakes. You went to talk to Bruno's father, didn't you? She asked, her voice no longer as harsh as before. Oliver nodded. I did, and it wasn't easy, but I had to do it. For myself, and for you. Sophia took a deep breath and for the first time in a long time, felt a little lighter. It wasn't full forgiveness, but it was a beginning. That night, father and daughter sat down to dinner together. The silence was still present, but it was a different kind of silence, no longer heavy or suffocating, but a silence filled with hope. Slowly, they began to rebuild what had been broken. A few months later, Oliver and Sophia visited Elizabeth's grave together. It was the first time they had gone together since the funeral. Sophia, holding a flower, knelt down and gently placed it on the grave. I think Mom would be proud of us, Sophia said, looking at her father with a small smile. Oliver, with tears in his eyes, felt that he had finally kept his promise. He couldn't bring Elizabeth back, but he had saved his relationship with his daughter. And he knew, deep in his heart, that this was what Elizabeth had wanted all along. With his voice trembling, Oliver whispered, I finally did it. If you enjoyed this emotional story and want to see more content like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That way you'll stay up to date with all the new stories and videos we post. And now we want to hear your opinion. What did you think of Oliver and Sophia's journey? Do you believe it's possible to rebuild family bonds after so much pain and betrayal? Can forgiveness really heal such deep wounds? Leave your comment and share your thoughts on this emotional story of redemption, overcoming, and the weight of a promise. Oh, and don't forget to check out the other videos on the channel. We have many other exciting stories full of twists, life lessons, and captivating characters. See you in the next video.